we're delighted to welcome you to our second edition of Deliberation Unpacked, and we're looking forward to hearing a lot about kind of the impacts and insights that came out of one of our most high impact projects that we delivered recently, which is Waltham Forest's Citizens' Assembly on Neighbourhood Policing. So this Citizens' Assembly brought together about 50 people representing the diversity of Waltham Forest in 2024 to look at the issue of neighbourhood policing. So where did this come from? Waltham Forest Council wanted to ensure that all its communities have a stronger voice in how local policing is delivered. This is why they held this Citizens' Assembly to hand power to a representative group of local people to deliberate and make recommendations on how neighbourhood policing can be improved. These recommendations have shaped how the local police work in neighbourhoods in Waltham Forest, and also improved the engagement between the local authority and the police so they can better support their residents. So we're really excited to hear more about this today. We're going to talk through this process, and we've got some key people in the room who are involved. So I'm going to introduce you. If you can give us a bit of a wave to say who you are, and then I'm going to stop talking and we're going to hand over to all of you with some guided questions. If you have any questions that come up, please note them down and we'll come to them at the end for the Q&A. So we have Daisy in the room, who you just heard from, who was involved in the delivery, the assembly, and was one of the co-facilitators. We've got Dan from Waltham Forest. Give us a wave, Dan, who's the Assistant Director of Strategy and Design at London Borough of Waltham Forest, who had a hand in this project. We've also got Elisa. You can give us a wave, Elisa, who's also from the council. And then we've got two of our assembly members. We've got the participants. So we've got Soraya and Sarah. So yeah, I'd like to start off just to give each of those people a little bit of time to explain what their role was on the project. So if I can go first to Soraya and Sarah, can you introduce yourself and what you did, basically?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Soraya. I was in the Citizen Assembly participant, as you mentioned. And basically, our role was there was a set of questions. And as a team, we have to come together and answer those, our own perspective on those things. What do we know about it? How much do we know about it? And what should be done regarding that instance? Or if there is not much awareness, how the awareness should reach to people. So those are the kind of things. And we gathered all the information, all the opinions together, and then we formed a set of reports out of that where we all sit together in groups and came together and we made the report and we were all almost satisfied with the report of the Citizen Assembly, and it carried forward from there. And yeah, I was part of all those processes.
Thanks, Soraya. Sarah?
Yeah, basically what Soraya said. We were all chosen and we turned up. I think it was 3 weekends it took, and we were all on sort of split onto different tables, and each table was facilitated. And as Soraya said, there were questions, and we also had people come to talk to us about their experience. So it was split into areas like youth or people with disabilities or that sort of area, and we'd have a sort of expert who'd come and talk to us, and then we would answer the question. We would have questions for them, and we could write priorities about what we thought were important. And then, as Soraya said, at the end, we had a great big list of priorities, and we had to shrink them down to a smaller number and then write the actual report about what we thought would be the best way to go about answering the question.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Soraya and Sarah. So over to Dan and Elisa. Can you tell us a little bit about your role on the project?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for inviting us along today. So I'm Dan. I was a part of a project team designing the assembly and then making sure that we did something impactful with the recommendations on the other side. And over the course of the 3 weekends, I was a kind of co-opted member of catering staff, making sure our assembly members who were doing all the hard work were well fed and fueled for the deliberation. So that was my role over the 3 weekends.
Hi everyone, I'm Elisa. So I was quite lucky to experience lots of roles in the build-up to and during the assembly. So my primary role was on the project team alongside Dan, and I was leading on the community engagement, which I'll sort of talk about a bit more about later on in the presentation. But at the assembly itself, I was one of the table facilitators for a couple of the weekends. And then one of the weekends, I was also part of the support team. So like that sort of backstage, helping out with like catering, room setup. And I also did a couple of the presentations presenting the results of the community engagement. And I'm now leading on one of the projects in response to the recommendation. So yeah, I feel like I've had the full spectrum of the assembly.
Nice, thank you. And last but not least, Daisy, what was your role?
Hi everyone, I'm Daisy. I'm an engagement lead at Involve. So on this project, I was part of the Involve project team, running and setting up the project. Like Dan and Lisa, I had various roles at the different weekends, depending on where I was needed. And then I pulled together the final report and have been working with the council since then on where they've been getting to.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to get straight into the questions now. So the first question, and I guess this is to the people who work at the council, who are involved in the delivery from that side. What was the setting? So kind of what was happening? Where did you start from with this process?
So I guess the setting for us was the kind of decision to proceed with the Citizens Assembly came about in sort of mid-2023, and it was a product of, I guess, a few local and regional drivers. So locally, we had a particular challenge in terms of levels of trust and confidence in the police. And we also knew that fear of crime was a significant concern for residents. So over half of our residents highlighted fear of crime as one of their top concerns. So there was a sort of local dimension to this. And then regionally at the time, Baroness Casey had concluded and published her team's review of the Metropolitan Police. And so a combination of that regional impetus for change and reform at the Met level, and also quite distinct local drivers that we as a council and police wanted to respond to in Waltham Forest, I guess gave rise to a will to ensure that we had not only a really robust response to those drivers, but one that was truly community powered. And I guess the model of a citizens assembly, as we sort of touched on in the intro, is one that we'd used successfully in the past, focusing on the issue of hate crime, and the legacy of that assembly is still being seen in delivery and the way we manage and report data around hate crime, for example, today. So we'd seen the kind of potential and magic of bringing a representative group of the borough into the room to really get into a knotty issue and come up with a really powerful set of recommendations, which of course is what Soraya, Sarah and their 48 fellow assembly members handed to us at the end of that third weekend. And so that was the kind of combination of drivers, and then the Citizens Assembly was a model that we'd use effectively in Waltham Forest to kind of give us that strong community mandate for change that was really shaped by our communities.
Beautiful, thank you, Dan. So what was the reaction? So what was the process? Who was involved? Daisy, do you want to kick us off? And then we'll go to Soraya and Sarah.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I've already set out the question. So that was, how can the police build trust with all communities and make Waltham Forest feel safer? And the kind of at the start of the process, I think there were quite a lot of discussions around that question, and really chose to focus on kind of feelings of safety rather than crime reduction, for example. So there was a real focus on kind of trust and feelings of safety. And then the assembly itself, so we were aiming to recruit 50 assembly members to take part in the process, and kind of as usual for a sortition or kind of civic lottery based approach, did that across the borough, making sure that it was a group that was as reflective as possible within those numbers of the people that live in Waltham Forest. So that included kind of various demographics, and also making sure that people had a range of different experiences of policing. So people might have interacted with the police a lot, others might have interacted with the police far less, and also different kind of existing levels of trust in policing. So we thought that was really important in terms of who was in the room. And then the assembly itself took part over 3 weekends, as the assembly members have said, and that was over 5 days. And over those 5 days, as is usual in an assembly process, there was a range of different information inputs that the assembly members heard about. We really focused on this assembly in making sure that that sort of expertise and information was really varied. So it came from different sources. Some of them were maybe your more traditional subject matter experts, like academics. Some of them were kind of direct experts from the community, talking about how different community groups kind of experience policing for different reasons in different ways. Elisa's going to talk, I think, a bit more about the community engagement, so they heard directly what their neighbours felt about policing, and feelings of trust and safety. So lots of different sorts of expertise in the room, and that also included hearing directly from the council and directly from the police. And then, yeah, the kind of time after that to really deliberate on what was going to work best in Waltham Forest to solve the specific problems that they'd identified as a group. So it wasn't to solve kind of problems they'd been given. They spent time at the beginning talking about what the issues were, and then spent time thinking about how to solve those issues, and enough time also to really prioritize out of everything they'd come up with what was the most important kind of solutions and recommendations, and why. And then out of that created a set of recommendations, which are brilliant. They're in the report that Dan has shared in the chat. And those recommendations are written in the assembly members' own words. So that was the process in a very summary level, but happy to answer any more questions.
Thanks, Daisy. So I think that actually leads us quite nicely into what Elisa is going to touch on now. So I'll go to Elisa first, and then Soraya, then Sarah. If you have anything else to add from the participant perspective, that would be great. Elisa?
Yeah, so as Daisy mentioned, in the build up to the assembly, we did a lot of engagement with the community to get a better understanding of their views of safety and policing. And I think this helped quite a lot on several levels. It was both helpful in like preparing the information that would go to the assembly to help assembly members to understand the views of their neighbours, better understand the issue. But actually, I think something maybe we hadn't anticipated as much was how much it would sort of influence the design of the assembly itself, and how much we'd focus on certain issues. So when it came to choosing speakers for the assembly and the sort of deciding kind of what sessions we'd have and what we'd prioritize, I think it really sort of helped us to sort of narrow down what was important to the local community. And I think also worth noting that whilst we wanted to do this engagement to understand the breadth of experience of the wider community, we also really wanted to use it as a way to hear from groups particularly impacted by the issues. So victims of crime, residents who'd had certain experiences of policing, so stop and search, for instance. And I think across the mechanisms that we used, we really created a lot of space for a wide spectrum of experiences. So I'll just briefly talk you through the different kind of engagement methods we used. So we commissioned a research partner who led some really interesting in-depth research. Yeah, the methodology just like really stood out to us when we were reading the bids. So they did these friendship paired interviews where they paired friends who'd had sort of similar experiences to speak to those. And I think the idea was that they could, you know, in the presence of a peer, feel like they'd be able to sort of open up about those experiences more in a sort of safe way. And they also did intergenerational family ethnographies where again they'd go into sort of people's homes and speak to their experiences of policing and safety, but have sort of different layers of the family present, which again I think was really sort of sensitive and thoughtful methodology, and again something that maybe we didn't anticipate. We sort of learned so much in the sort of pre-engagement as well as the kind of the process of running the assembly itself. And then we did a lot of youth engagement as well. So we're really lucky to have some amazing youth engagement groups at the council who are trained in doing sort of consultation with their peers out in the community. So they develop surveys and they go out and speak to young people. again, young people lead it and design the questions. So I think it means that the young people that they approach sort of feel like they're able to sort of open up to them. And we also did workshops in schools, a range of schools with different ages, and again, a range of demographics. And then we also ran a survey which wasn't representative, but it was that sort of option for any resident to sort of take part and have their views heard on the issues. And we actually received over 1,300 responses, which we were really pleased with. So yeah, we really heard from a range of perspectives, and I think it was fed into the assembly in a variety of ways. So we did some presentations at the assembly presenting that information, and then assembly members also had the chance to sort of ask questions about that information, and we went around to the tables and they could ask about like the methodology and sort of pursue, I guess, further like lines of inquiry around that, and like hear more about certain like perspectives that they were interested in. And I think what was really interesting was that what we heard from the community also then really linked through to like what the final recommendations were. So there was a lot of sort of alignment there. Yeah, I think I'll hand over to if Sarah and Soraya want to say anything.
Brilliant, thank you. Let's start with you, Soraya. Is there anything else you would like to add about kind of your experience of the process, of the outcome?
Yeah. So taking part in this, the whole thing, like, just an understanding of that things are getting, like, noticed of, which was really good. And also during the process, the kind of information that was available and the presentation and participants were allowed to speak to each other, and like after the presentation they would go to each table and then have a conversation with the table members and answer questions. Kind of was not only helpful for the participants to like come up with a solution or recommendations, but also for the other person as I speak on the table or personally when I spoke to them, that we like kind of learn from each other. And like there were so many councils and people who were like, we really like this idea, and yeah, we will without this council as well, now that we've understood this, or like the uh, youth programs, they were like, yeah, there are really good recommendations, and just by reaching out, so both ways learn from each other, and it of course helped us to go with the solution. And myself as well, I kind of understood a lot more, which about the policing, about the council, about the maybe the help, or I understood the other people who were in the community, as Daisy said, that it was a lot of people from like every other background. So like I understood each other. We all understood each other, and it was a really good experience and an informative one, I think, for all whoever was involved in this. Yeah,
Thank you, Soraya. Now, Sarah, I know it's hard to come last on these things, but is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It was a really good experience. It was each weekend we were allocated a table that we sat on, and each time we went back, we were on a different table with different people. And so as we went through the process, we met more and more people from around Waltham Forest that we may not have ever met any other way. And it was really interesting, like Soraya said, to hear from the police and from the council and all the different areas that were speaking to us. For some of us, we'd never heard about those sort of things before because we haven't experienced them. So I think it really helped to build a kind of community experience together. And we all understood a lot more about why somebody might be saying, actually, I think the police should do this or shouldn't do this, or whichever thing it was. And maybe we hadn't thought about that bit before because it hadn't happened to anyone we know. So I thought it was, obviously there was a lot of preparation that had gone on before for people to come and do that discussion, and I'm just hearing kind of how much, but it was a really good experience, and I felt a lot more like, yeah, this is where I live. These are the people that are in my place of where I live.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So we talked about the process and we talked about some of the outcomes. So I want us now to think about impact. So what was the impact of this citizens' assembly? So what decisions were changed? What mindsets were changed? What kind of cultures or capacities do you think changed as a result of it? So I'm going to come to you, Soraya, because I know you need to drop off quite soon. So if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, the impact it has, as if I'll talk about personally myself, it is I actually have more trust, or like I have more knowledge, if not like, I have more knowledge of how to do things because my background is different and I came here and now I have more knowledge about things. And the same thing can go around in my community as well. If someone is going with some kind of a problem, I have been on a platform where I got this good information that I can pass on to people. And also, a good impact is that I don't, maybe my insecurities as one of the people who stand out, sitting with a different kind of people, it kind of comforted me with it as well, that how everyone is so okay with everything, like a kind of assurance that it gave as well. And also, like, with the kind of work, the process that it is going through, the whole thing was not just like, program and few days and it is gone. So there is a continuous updates of what is happening and things are happening on it, which you feel proud of, and it is good as well. So it's a good impact overall, and a personally for myself as well. And I think it's going to be a good impact on the community as well, because a different background came together and heard each other and said something that could resolve a lot of people's problems, not just one community. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Soraya. Sarah, I'm going to come to you next. What do you think some of the impacts were from this process?
Very much feeling much more part of a community and knowing a lot more about how things work. It was very interesting to understand how the policing I suppose all of the London boroughs, but specifically ours, had changed over the years, and to hear from the police about what they were fed up with and couldn't really do anything about and stuff like that was very interesting. I think the other thing is, since we did the report, we have had updates about what's happening, and some of us went along to meetings, or a meeting earlier in the year from Waltham Forest Council, to talk about the main 3 points from the report that they've started to take on. And that was really good to know that, it's a year later and there's stuff happening and you can see it's happening. And particularly the youth part, with the young people who we saw at the assembly and then were coming back and carrying on with their stuff, was really inspiring to see how they were asking for change and very, very able to enunciate what that change should be and how it should work. It was really good.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. Can I come to Dan or Elisa? What are some of the impacts that you've seen and experienced?
Yeah, it's difficult to follow that, but I'll try. I think I was saying to colleagues earlier, when I think about the impact of the assembly, I think of it as like a kind of stone in the pool and the ripples out. And like, it's great to hear the impact that it had on people who are in the room. And I guess we as officers from the council and the police were in the room as well. And I think it had an impact on us in terms of, me personally as an officer, having the confidence to kind of engage in more depth with communities, and the richness you get back as a result of that is so incredibly powerful. But also some of the skills that officers from the council who were involved in the process were able to gain as a result of doing this. So we had, I think, probably 15 officers involved in the table facilitation over the course of the 3 weekends, and received training from Involve. And facilitation is such an incredible skill to do facilitation well. And so those colleagues have become our kind of in-house experts, and whenever there's a facilitation job to be done, those are the kind of pool of people that often I'm emailing out to ask to help, and they've shared their knowledge within the organisation as well, which I think is a really fantastic thing to have seen. I think more broadly, and Sarah touched on it, You know, like there are 10 recommendations, and we'd set out from the outset to doing something about all of the recommendations that the Assembly produced. And that was part of the framing to prospective Assembly members from the very first letter that hit people's doorsteps. And I think that that is something that has, you know, insofar as is possible, we've tried to kind of hold true to what we've done with the Assembly on the other side. And, you know, so much effort and thought was put into the design of the Assembly, but it would have been such a crying shame for it to have just been a moment in time that didn't lead to any kind of tangible action, and always kind of open to being challenged for where we can go further. But we've published a comprehensive action plan setting out against all of those recommendations what we're going to do. And then our citizens, our community safety citizens panel, which is a kind of existing citizens body that we've refreshed partly as in response to the Assembly, and encouraged Assembly members to consider joining that, will hold us accountable for delivering that action plan going forward. So there will continue to be kind of citizen oversight to do that. And I think Elise will be able to talk, and Sarah touched on it, with a bit more detail as to how we are also involving people in taking those, you know, really great but relatively high level recommendations that the Assembly produced and turning them into something workable and that's going to deliver the impact that the Assembly told us we want to see. So I think the final thing I'd say, if you broaden it out even further, and I wouldn't be so bold as to suggest that there was a direct kind of cause and effect from Assembly to this, but we have seen trust and confidence levels in the police go up, not insignificantly in Waltham Forest. So I think they've gone up. This might not be the latest data, but they certainly had gone up by about 10% since the initial decision to join, to hold the Assembly. So that's a really kind of positive trajectory. And obviously, as I set out at the start, a real key focus for us in choosing to do this was about rebuilding trust and confidence. And like all credit to police colleagues for engaging fully in the process throughout and supporting us to do that. So yeah, Elisa might be able to add a bit more kind of specificity on that, but that's a bit of a sense of some of the wider impacts as well.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, I've been leading on one of the projects that we are currently designing in response to two of the recommendations that we had around young people. So one of them being around creating more opportunities for young people to engage with the police, sort of in safe settings, to build genuine relationships with them and have sort of more informal interactions, so they can really get to sort of understand each other more. And the second recommendation being around young people having more opportunities to shape decision making. And I think for me, co-leading this project with someone else at the council, we've really been able to take a lot of learning from the community engagement and the wider process of the Assembly itself into the design of this project. And I'd say the two key things that we've really taken forward have been that the process of co-designing sort of any scheme or engagement is often just as meaningful, if not more meaningful, than, you know, the scheme or whatever it is that you're holding itself, which I could sort of go into in a bit more detail in a second. And I think the second one being that meaningful co-design really takes sort of time and patience, and it's not something you can rush, but when you do it right, it's so much more powerful and I think meaningful when you're bringing everyone on board and you're or like genuinely having a role in like shaping decisions and sort of how it looks. And I think, again, that's something that we've been doing in this project. So just a brief overview of the project, we're running an inclusive mentoring scheme between young people and the police. And this was an idea that came directly from young people. I think they felt that one-off instances engagement with the police just don't work, you know, given we know there are a lot of issues in terms of young people and their trust in the police. And we spoke to some local young people and they felt that's something that was sort of longer term, where they'd actually get to open up to the police and get to know them better, would be much more impactful in terms of sort of changing their views of the police and really getting feeling comfortable enough to share their experiences with them. So we are going to be pairing small groups of young people to local police officers, and running training in advance of this to sort of equip them to feel sort of safe in that process and confident to share their experiences. And then they'll be doing 5 to 6 mentoring sessions across 6 months. And we are designing the whole scheme with young people and the police. And I think that goes back to my point around the process of co-design being just as meaningful as the scheme itself, because I feel like we've been testing the sort of model of the project and the sort of mentoring concept through the co-design sessions that the young people and police have been having. Almost unintentionally, they've become like mini mentoring sessions, and we've seen them opening up to each other. So we've kept sort of consistency in the police that we've engaged with and the young people. And it sort of feels like those relationships and trust have been, already being improved through the design, through those dialogues that we're opening. And even just small things like we'll start off each co-design session with the police and young people with like icebreakers, and the police have spoken of how different that is to the culture they've got internally, and how they want to start like bringing icebreakers into their like training, because they feel like that will help sort of I guess soften some of the internal divisions they might have, because obviously they're quite a hierarchical institution, and they were saying like often that training a more junior person wouldn't want to go and speak to someone senior, and that the icebreakers might help with that. So it kind of feels nice that we're able to sort of impact, even if in like a really small way, like small aspects of, you know, their culture as well, and the relationship that we've got with them. And I think the second one being that meaningful co-design really takes time and patience. So I think, again, we've been really trying to embed the principles and values of the whole project, which really centers around like youth voice, into the design. And that's included like the design of the design. So when we do go out to do workshops with young people, we'll actually design them with young people, and they'll lead those sessions, and they'll like decide that, you know, the icebreakers that they do. But that obviously does require like lead-in time and like time dedicated on our end to like facilitate the co-planning. But again, like the result is that we've really created sort of a mini project team in a way that all feel like really passionate and able to take on different aspects of the project. So yeah, we're still in this design phase, but like also currently recruiting participants. And again, when we sort of have the informal sort of interviews with them, we're going to have like police and young people on the panel, and you know, the young people have been involved in like decision making aspects as well, such as like scoring the tenders for our delivery partners. So there's just been so many layers of kind of, I guess, collaboration both on the young people and police end that we've been trying to layer into the scheme, which I think is really going to like impact on the sort of quality of the mentoring relationships as well. I think it's all just like feeding into each other, and we very much like learned the power of a lot of this from running the assembly and things like the community engagement. So a lot of I think lasting impact as a result of the way we went about things.
Brilliant, really exciting, and excited to hear where that progresses to as well. So thank you, Elisa. Daisy, is there anything in terms of impact kind of beyond the work of the assembly that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think that my kind of big impact reflection from the assembly was we've kind of, similarly to Dan described, that sort of ripple effect, seen different organisations who were kind of interested in the assembly and who came to observe at the assembly, for example, be really interested in doing a similar thing in their area, or for example in their civil service department, or whoever it is. And I think what that's really shown me definitely is, you know, we talk about like citizens' assemblies as quite a sort of abstract thing. It's quite hard to imagine if you're not actually in the room, and it's quite kind of it feels quite contrary to the whole like idea and ethos of a citizens' assembly, which is really like about being there with people. But if you bring someone in to watch it and observe, and they can see these conversations that Sarah and Soraya described kind of happening at tables, and see how people are interacting with people they might not normally speak to, and changing their mind and learning new things, and then coming up with this amazing set of recommendations, that is then it's just, you can't replace that by any sort of description of the process. So yeah, we've had lots of kind of different and surprising follow-ups from different places as a result of the assembly happening, and new projects happening as a result, and people drawing on it as examples in different places. So there's been a lot of wider impact kind of within the deliberation and participation world as well, which has been brilliant to see.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to wrap up with one final question for each of you. Now, I'm going to challenge you, and you do have to give me one answer, like one sentence. So if you had to say there was one key learning for you when it comes to impact from this Citizens Assembly, what would it be? One key learning for you when it comes to impact from the Citizens Assembly. So I'm going to go to Dan first.
I'm conscious there are community engagement professionals surrounding me on this call who might roll their eyes, but I was not an expert coming into this, and I'd worked in organisations where we'd done summit type things and moved on to the next summit type thing. And I think like the real learning from me is that like community engagement can never just be a moment in time, and actually it's potentially worse to do that in terms of how disempowering it is to claim you're willing to kind of listen to people and share power and then not do anything about it on the other side. And like I said, I think there's scope for us to go further and improve, always off the back of the Citizens Assembly, and I'm really kind of looking forward to the challenge that we get as we implement the recommendations. But that is the big one for me. Can't be a moment in time.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. Daisy.
No, I mean lots. It's hard to choose a learning, but I think, and we've again heard this from Sarah and Soraya and other assembly members that I've spoken to as well, but the importance of that follow up with assembly members or people taking part in any process beyond the end of the process, and really, 5 days you can do quite a lot in 5 days, but you can't get into the like real detail of kind of responses from the council about different ways to do things, and kind of really work together on the implementation of some of those recommendations. So I think that's really important and feels like something that is often doesn't happen. And it's just really brilliant to see that it is happening in this process.
Great, thank you, Daisy. Elisa, what's your one key learning on impact?
I think it's a bit of a running theme of this whole session, but I guess is that like the multi-layered nature of impact and how it goes far beyond like the projects that we're delivering themselves and the action plan we've put together. But like I think that I've just learned that we couldn't like predict where like doing an exercise like this would take us, and that there's been so many, like we knew it'd be powerful, but I hadn't anticipated, like for instance, even in the room, seeing the strong relationships that people were building like with each other, like the assembly members, like in and outside of the assembly room, like how much more like positive our relationship with the police would be, like embedding like all this learning that I'd shared into other projects. So I think just that the impact sort of goes far beyond what we'd anticipated.
Great, thank you. And finally, Sarah.
I think I guess I probably would have thought it, but it was really nice to be part of something where actually it really made you feel that the general public is totally smart and can totally make these decisions and listen to each other and respect each other and come up with a list of priorities. And I don't think that's always how general news is presented most of the time. So it was really nice to be part of that. And I think that was quite a good takeaway.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your insight. I wanted to say a big thanks to all of our speakers today, to Sarah, to Soraya, to Elisa, to Dan, and to Daisy. And thank you to Adam as well for doing all the tech and everything else behind the scenes. I hope you found that really useful in terms of some of the impacts around the Waltham Forest Citizens Assembly on neighbourhood policing. And we hope you'll join us next time for Deliberation Unpacked.